so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. The name of this sermon is Producing Good, Properly Defined. We have all sorts of people define good different ways. They say, well, this is really, really good. This video game where you blow up people and also it's very good. This is one of those texts in the Bible that define how you produce good things. What will you do to produce good fruit? This tells you. It has a very set way, and the other ways will fail because God will cause them to fail. You may say that that's kind of mean on the part of God, not allowing people to succeed in whatever they want to do, to say that it's my way and only my way, and that it's narrow. And of all those last things I mentioned, he does say that. It's my way and only my way, and it is narrow. Jesus said this in Matthew 7, verse 13 and 14. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small, and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few that find it. Well, that part of few that find it sounds like, well, is that fair? And of course it is, because Jesus says it is. This is the right way. Now, to answer the question about God being mean-spirited, I think it's fair to say that he isn't. He just doesn't like things that are counterfeit, that try to pass themselves off as the real things. There's lots of broad road religions that have a way for you to get to God, and they all fail on this test. A lot of things have been mislabeled as good, and God has an answer to that. And Jesus is using this analogy of the vines and the branches to identify which produces good fruit and to compare that to us as Christians. We're compared to the branches. Now, the world produces lots and lots of stuff. And it depends who you are, whether you call it good. I was talking to the granddaughter of a friend of mine. Now, she had just been off to college, and she had art courses, and we were talking. And I said, you know, that some of the stuff that's produced as art is really pornography. And she said, no, it isn't. It's people who are explaining in their art how bad pornography is by using pornography. And I couldn't figure that out. It just doesn't make sense. It's like, this is bad poison, but I'm going to get you to take it so you understand how bad it is. On Netflix, there's a movie called, I've lost the name of that. Anyway, Cuties. It was made in France by a woman, and she made it expressly to show how horrible it was to make sexualize young girls, 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, and make them sexualized. So what she did is, in the movie, she had these 12-year-old girls join a dance contest. And they danced so provocatively that if you downloaded it to your computer, in many places that would be considered child pornography, and you could be arrested for possessing child pornography. Now, the Cannes Film Festival called it good. They even gave it an award. But I expect that at this point, now that it's been out for 3 or 4 months, lots of people who collect child pornography have collected that too. Now, people think that the mafia and those families who make money illegally, they make it through drugs and prostitution, and that's their biggest moneymaker. That's not true. Their biggest moneymaker is making food that's not what the label says it is. It could be scallops, those little round fish that people eat. Well, there was a company in northern New Brunswick that were using whitefish and going ka-chook, 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 ka-chook. They got caught. Fake scallops. Who knew, right? There's a company in Italy that makes high-end olive oil. You buy a bottle of olive oil, it's $24. Good stuff. If you went during the day, that's what you would get. That's what would be produced. If you took a bottle off the assembly line, but they shut down, everybody goes home, turn the lights off, and then somebody comes in the middle of the night and turns the lights back on. They use the same bottles, fill them with corn oil or something else very cheap. Same bottle, same label, same everything, but it's not. There's something called meat glue, and I don't know what it is, but what they do is if you want to make a nice round steak that is sold in high-end restaurants, sirloin tip steak or whatever, these special steaks with a rope around them and they're this thick, well, they did a test and it's the offcuts that the butcher can't use and goes and throws them in, and they use meat glue and put them together. W5, or one of those programs like that, tested a lot of food products, and they found that 80% of the products they tested weren't what the label said. And one of the products they tested was orange juice. It was made from water, sugar, flavor, and wood pulp. If you buy a bottle of fresh orange juice, you hope it's made from fresh oranges, not from wood pulp. Now some people could say, well, what harm does it do? It's not poison. People feel good by drinking a bottle of a glass of orange juice, even if it isn't. And it's like religion. People say, well, you know, religion isn't real. No, none of them are, but they don't do any harm and they make people feel good. But Jesus doesn't say that. He's very clear on false religion. Even the religious people of his day in the Jewish community were false religion. He's very clear on false religion and fake gods and what he'll do with them in the end. And this is what this passage is all about. Well, number one is pain for everyone, some good and some bad. So pain people think, well, pain, that's not good, but yes, sometimes it is. And this is what it says here in verse 1 and 2. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it, so that it may bear more fruit. Now, you see, here, there's two possible pains. The pain of being taken away, and the pain of being pruned. And now pruning is cutting away the parts of a plant that produces fruit so that it'll produce more fruit. Jeff and I were talking about this, and he said, yes, he was a landscaper for 10 years, and he talked about apple trees. And he said apple trees are pruned after the leaves have fallen off and all the sap has gone to the roots. And then he said, if you watch a professional pruner prune an apple tree, you throw your hands in your face and you say, no, you killed it. But the next spring, it comes out and there's all these fresh buds and there's all these fresh little branches and all these blossoms and a ton more fruit. He's done a lot of good when you thought, well, that doesn't look like it's going to work. But what about the parts that he cuts off? He cuts all these pieces off. What about them? Well, they only have one option, and that's to die. And that's what should happen to things that God decides to remove from our lives. And Jesus made a distinction between branches that get a trim and branches that get removed completely. And of course, being taken away is worse because it's permanent. It does not return. And it can't get any worse than that. So pruning is painful. It requires you to accept the loss of whatever the person in control says to remove. And you have to be happy with that. And watch them allow you to keep some and toss the rest away. I'm building kitchen cupboards for our house. It's time. They were built in the early 50s, so maybe it's time. Anyway, Ashley was over to help Wanda. And the kitchen cupboards are going to be different. And they were taking all the stuff out of the kitchen cupboards. And Ashley is ruthless. She says, gone, 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 gone. And Wanda was saying, no. So Wanda was trying to save some of the stuff that Ashley was pruning from the shelves. And once it was pruned, it wasn't coming back. It was in boxes on the kitchen floor. She said, carry that out to my car so there won't be any of it come out of the boxes. Well, that's what happened. It left that afternoon. Now, pruning removes the sin as far as the east is from the west, but it still leaves the branches hooked to the tree, or the vine in this case. When God the Father removes the branch who Jesus, the vine, who is Jesus, has no more contact with it. It's gone. And it, like that tree out here in the yard, eventually that tree will completely cover up the spot. You won't even know that there was a branch there. It'll be gone. Even the evidence of it will be gone. Now, that's not a very good end for a branch that had all, or a person who had all the good possibilities, the chances in life that everyone else had. Now, you know, the pruning isn't done just by God. There are lots of people who want to do pruning in your life. I have two stories that I'll tell you quickly. There are two women. The first woman, she only allowed God to prune her. She was very adamant about that. Anyway, I was watching a video, and have you ever watched a video where you see somebody, and just by the way they act, you say, I love that person. Not in a sexual sort of way, but just like, I could be their friend. I know I could. I know that we would spend 15 minutes together and we'd be fast friends. Anyway, she was being interviewed, and she said she started a ministry of teaching prisoners, male prisoners, leadership training. It was a 4-month course. She would go into the prison. There would be 50 men who hadn't seen a pretty woman in months or years. And she was very young. She was 23, 24, and very pretty. But when I saw her, I just loved her because of the way, the personality. Anyway, you thought to yourself, this woman is going to be eaten alive by these prisoners. There's going to be somebody back in that corner, and somebody over here is going to yell some horrible sexual thing, and she's going to leave the room in tears. But that never happened. Anybody who started something like that was gone immediately. And all the other prisoners loved her the way I did. And they would have, that person would get a good beating once and you see, she was able to do this. And she was able to do this because no one pruned her but God. No one said you have to do it this way. No. Now the second story is another woman that I saw. She was, I loved her too. Just had to. She was on Britain's Got Talent. She was 16, from a little Scottish village no one's ever heard tell of. And she She had really red, frizzy hair, but she was the most beautiful. She was the picture of a beautiful country woman, little country girl. And she sang so amazingly, everyone noticed. Everyone said, she's wonderful. And they put her on. They said, everybody, if you've ever watched America's Got Talent, they vote and she gets to come back. And she came back the second week and she did wonderful. And then somebody decided to help her. They were going to prune her. And I watched the fourth week. Now I don't watch it on TV, but I watched the video on YouTube. The fourth week, somebody had changed her. They'd made her flashy. They'd fixed her. And it was awful. Everyone recognized it was awful. She had something beautiful, and they changed it. And so I never thought any more of that except, wow, that was a mistake. So it's been 6 or 7 years since that happened, and I happened to be watching some videos, and I like children's videos, children who sing on one of these shows and do a wonderful job. I watched her video from 7 years ago, and YouTube populates the videos and puts ones like it on, and it was a video of her talking about herself. And the title was, My 5-Year Struggle with Alcoholism. Somebody had destroyed her. They pruned her, and she could not live with who they had made her into. And 5 years later, now she's 22, and been an alcoholic for 5 years. I thought, I wanted to cry. Who could have done this to her? Why would they do this to her? Why does the world want to make it into her, the image? People think that when you become famous, you get to keep all the things that you were. But most of the time, it's not true. Fame and fortune and wealth and all that spoils people. Somebody telling me somebody got $40 million. And I'm sure everyone here could manage to live for quite a number of years on $40 million. He couldn't. It's all gone. A couple of years, all gone. Blew it all. You see, Jesus is exclusive. He says God the Father is the only one that prunes you. And if you're not being pruned by Him, you're a branch that gets cut off and destroyed. Number 2 is remain in me. If you look at verse 4 and 5, it says, Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Now, the first part of this text is the pruning. And pruning, of course, will be uncomfortable. God will say, you can't have that anymore. I'm taking it away. But you're lucky that you're one of those chosen to be pruned instead of removed. You get to stay. And life is only possible if you keep those connections healthy. If you say, I'm moving away and I'm breaking the bond I have with the vine, and I have to make this fixed. I have to get this fixed. I have to allow it to be repaired. And there can be no thought of you saying, well, I'm the branch, I'm with the vine, God has did the pruning, I'm done, I'm good, I'm glad that's over. This is what it says in Matthew 13:43. It's Jesus cast out demons. And you say, well, I wonder what happened to those people after the demon was cast out. Now, when the unclean spirit comes out of a man, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds it unoccupied, swept, and put in order. Then it comes and takes along with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself. And they go in and live there, and the last state of the man becomes worse than the first. See, Jesus is saying this evil spirit was cast out, and now this is an empty shell full, ready to be filled with the fruit of my Spirit. And if you don't get that filling, if you just say, oh, well, I'm good, I'm all right, I'm on my own, I can handle this, your first will be worse than your last. Now that was the stick. You've heard that stick and carrot. That's the stick. If you don't remain, the worse the things that you escape will come back. The carrot is that if you stay, all will be well. You will be in the center of God's will for your life if you just stay connected. God is saying the good things I have for you, like service and responsibility, will be the fruit produced in you if you stay connected. But it's only possible if you stay connected. That's perfect. What could be better than that? If you decide, than producing good fruit. And it's so much better than if you decide to leave. Number 3 is coming to a sticky end. In verse 6 it says, if anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they're burned. Now, this is not a noble end. We think of firewood for your stove as a good thing. It's good, healthy wood. It's cut, it's split, it's dried. It does a good thing. My mother always used to use popple to make bread because she said it was the most consistent heat. The point is that was good, right? But this is not good. It's talking about when you clean up the yard and you put it in a pile, and then as the fire burns, you throw more in. It doesn't serve any purpose other than to keep the mosquitoes down on a muggy day. Jesus is using these branches in the fire as an analogy to say that this is the final end of someone who chooses a counterfeit God to serve. And that's the end of that. I had a great song about staying and going. Now, the staying part, here's the words of the song. But if you stay, I'll make you this a day, like no other day has been or will be again. We'll sail on the sun, we'll ride on the rain, we'll talk to the trees, we'll worship the wind. See, these are words of people that wrote for someone to stay. I need you to stay, I want you to stay. Because if you stay, it'll be great, it'll be good. And maybe for that person it would be, but it's nowhere near as good as to compare it to how Jesus wants you to stay and how much he'll love you. Well, the other half of that song says, but if you go, you might as well take the sun away. And there's other parts of that song, and it's one of those haunting songs that somebody thought long and hard to come up with words that were so meaningful. It was a famous song from 1962. You'll probably recognize this. Skeeter Davis, called The End of the World. Here's one stanza. Why does the sun keep on shining? Why does the sea rush to the shore? Don't they know it's the end of the world, 'cause you don't love me anymore? They both ache of unfulfilled opportunity that's gone away, and it's just leaves sadness behind. Remember what I said about taking away is worse? It's the worst possible for a branch because it's fatal. There's no coming back from it. Well, number 4 is a place of great reward. Verse 7 says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. That's one of those verses that people take out of context. They say, well, Jesus said this. Jesus said that whatever I ask, a house, a car, whatever. But they fail to look at the first part of this verse. The first part of this verse says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you. What the verse is saying is that if Jesus' words abide in you, you're saying, I need to ask for this because God is telling me to ask for this, and He's very happy to give it to you. He's thrilled to give it to you because He said, look, I want you to ask for this, and I'll give it to you. It's not like I want you to, you can ask for any car or truck or fancy house. No, you ask what I'm asking you to ask for, and I'll give it to you. Here's some of the other good things. In verse 8, he says, my Father is glorified in this, if you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father has loved me, I also love you. Abide in my love. And if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments, and abide in his love. These things I've spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be made full. This passage is right jam-packed full of wonderful things that he's going to give you. He says, my Father's glorified by this. You bear much fruit. You're loved and remain in my love, and my joy is in you, and your joy will be full. That's pretty amazing stuff. And it's exactly what you would want if you were on the narrow road that leads to salvation and the eternal life in heaven. So what's the application for us? The truth is, the fruit born without the vine is at best a poor copy of the real fruit, and at worst, it's an abomination that will cause more harm than good. I talked to you about meat made with meat glue. If you have a steak and you say, how do you want it done? Well, medium rare, that means the inside's not cooked. But that's okay with a regular steak because nothing has touched the inside of that. But a steak made with meat glue has been handled 5 times and thrown into someplace dirty and mixed together. And so if it's rare, you're likely to get botulism. That's the same is true with pork that's not real fruit. I picked up some groceries on my way home the other day, and I thought of the absurdity of things. We ban plastic bags and plastic straws because they're bad, and we celebrate the killing of the most innocent among us. Abortion is good, and useful plastic bags are bad. Is God laughing at us or crying for us? When people come up with things like that, you need to say, I don't think so, Skippy. I don't think that's right. I think you're completely wrong about that. And Jesus sets hard and fast rules, and he was the most merciful person that ever lived on the earth. He calls people who won't accept his free gift of salvation lots of bad things, and this one's no different. He's calling them branches that are going to be cut off and allowed to dry out and then burnt like garbage. It's not a very pretty picture. Now, I have an illustration here on the floor. These are 2 2x4s. Now, I go to Irving Mills quite often, and I look at their stuff, and this is how it works. They cut a tree, and it's made into a 2x4, and it's run through the planer. And when it's run through the planer, somebody rates it as if it's A, B, C, or D, and it's put in a pile and strapped together and put in the truck, and it's sent to Kent or Home Hardware, and somebody buys that, and they're going to build something with it. And it arrives at the construction site, and the guy cuts the straps off the bundle, and they're all nice and straight. Even this one was nice and straight. Apex bought this to build some stuff with. It was nice and straight when it came. And so the builder picks off a 2x4, and he looks at it, and he says, that's good. And And then he picks off one that's got a little bow, and he puts it aside, and he said, I'll use that somewhere else. I'll use shorter pieces of it. And he keeps setting it aside. And you look at this 2x4 and you say, what in the world could you do with that? How could you make anything out of that that wouldn't make a worse mess? And if you said, well, if that was a branch, I can see that being thrown in the fire because it's not any good anymore. And if it was a person, you'd say, well, you talked about the people at Nazareth House who would steal anything that they could get to get more drugs. And you say, well, I can see why they could be thrown on the fire. And I can see that only God would change them, and they need something. They need God. But what about this straight one? It's been off the pile for months. It's pretty straight. And what about it? Well, the truth is, it's going to be thrown in the fire too. If it's not producing fruit, what Jesus says, it's going to be thrown in the fire too. See, this could be our neighbor. They seem to manage all right. They've lived their life without Jesus, and they're pretty straight. They manage all right. What about them? Well, the answer is, like this one, they're going to get thrown in the fire. Going to bounce crooked, hit me in the leg. And this one too. The truth is that our neighbors, without God, are like the branches that Jesus talked about in this. They're going to be thrown in the fire. That's their end. And we can't have that. You see, the text only mentions two kinds of people. The kind that Jesus prunes and the kind that Jesus cuts off and throws in the fire. We read a whole lot of things that listed how wonderful these things are, the people that are just pruned. How they ask whatever you wish, and the Father's glorified, and they produce much fruit, and they're loved, and their joy is full. Wouldn't you hope that your neighbor gets those things as opposed to being thrown in the fire? I know I would. See, they're all on the broad road that leads to destruction. And there's no saving them except Jesus. No other false religion, no other, though that's good, but isn't. It's going to do it. So we need to come up with some way to speak to them. And of course with COVID it's hard, but as I said about this, we can send a card, a personal card, handwritten, that says, look, I was thinking about you, and here's a tract that says, God loves you. Hope we can meet when the restrictions are off. We can try something. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we're about to celebrate